There we are. Okay. Good morning.
Good
As we can.
morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good
Hi,
morning.
everyone.
Morning.
Thank you for being here, for us, for yourself, as we continue our very powerful journey of developing greater trust in Hashem. So today I want to begin, which I'm going to try and do every class, as I mentioned, with either an anecdote or a teaching that's not from the text, but that strengthens our bitachon. I want to share a story with you that occurred with a man by the name of Ephraim Ilin, who I think he's a European-born Jew, I believe, and he was actually very interesting that when that in 1948, before the state of Israel was established, he had some very successful business he arranged, I think the way he made his first business that did very well was importing cotton from Egypt to Italy. And we know all fine clothing comes from Italy, or at least if it has an Italian label, then it's got to be fine. He did very well with that. And so, he had connections, import, export, and Israel had reached out to him that they needed arms, because even before the state was founded, there was a lot of hostility. Unfortunately, that has been the whole history of our modern days in Israel. And he arranged a tremendous shipment of arms on a ship from, I believe it was from Italy, but he got Czechoslovakian rifles, machine guns, a lot of ammunition, like badly needed, desperately needed arms for Israel. The thing is, the British controlled Israel at that time, and you can't just take in a ship with goods. So he said that what they did was they went to a farmer who had potatoes, a tremendous amount of potatoes that were already starting to rot. And they put onto the ship in front of all of the arms, like a tremendous amount of crates of rotting potatoes. Now you can imagine if you have rotting potatoes on the ship for a few days until it gets from Europe to Israel, you open up whatever the hold is, and when the inspectors came to inspect what's on the ship, the stench of the rotting potatoes was so strong that they just ran off the ship. They didn't inspect. And it so happens that he delivered this in April of 1948. Of course, this was Hashem already setting up that Israel should have, the Jewish people should have mechanisms to defend themselves in a war, which, if you've ever read a little bit about or studied, was an impossible war, meaning that it was a joke for Israel for the Jewish people to even fight. The notion that they should fight was ridiculous. It was suicidal. And of course, we won. That's very important for us to keep in mind as we're witnessing what's going on today, with different oppositions come from different places in the world. But that's just the beginning of the story. The story I want to tell you is that a couple of years, he then ended up moving to Israel as Ephraim Ilin. And in 1948, the Henry Ford automobile company realized that Israel is a budding country and they're going to need cars. So they saw a great opportunity for the company. I'm guessing, I don't know the life of Henry. I didn't look it up, but I'm assuming Henry Ford was dead by then. I'm not 100% sure about that. He was a known anti-Semite, but companies care about money even more than their hate. So that's interesting. Anyway, so they decided they're going to open up a plant in Israel. Of course, what immediately happened was all of the Arab countries said we're going to boycott Ford Motor Company, and so they pulled out. And this was a terrible concern for Israel, because that was an indication that any company that's going to want to go to Israel is going to be boycotted, and they're not going to be able to get any of the significant companies to do business with. So someone approached Ephraim Millen. They knew he was a businessman, and they said that they were looking for for a different opportunity. And so there was a gentleman in London, Lord Israel Ziv, sounds Jewish. So he called up Ephraim Millen, and he said that there's a man in Europe that you must speak to. His name is Hickman Price, and he is works with the Kaiser Fraser Export Corporation, and his company just built an automobile plant in Holland. It's doing quite well, and they want to build a plant in Greece. You should speak to him. Maybe they'll build the plant in Israel. And so he went to speak to Hickman Price, who was very excited about the opportunity. But he said that they're going to need $2.5 million. This is in 1948. $2.5 million is probably $300 to $500 million today. So where's Ephraim Millen getting $500 million from? So he told this gentleman Hickman Price, look, can you invest $500,000, and I'll raise the other $2 million? And he figured, he'll find some wealthy Jews, and he'll get a few people to give $500,000 each, and they'll put the money together. But the reality was that when it came to sitting with the lawyers and drafting the contract, there was no money on the table. He wasn't able to come up with any of the money. He didn't know what to do. He didn't have the courage also to do it. It was terrifying, and he said he couldn't sleep. And he knew this was a great opportunity, but he just couldn't. How's he supposed to get this money and take that on his own shoulders? So he remembered, very interesting, he remembered that his father, when his father had a very major life decision to make, and that decision was whether his family should move to Israel, and this was, I guess, in the maybe in the 20s or so, or sometime. His father, who did his father go to seek out advice? It must have been in the 20s, actually, the 20s or the 30s, 1920s, 1930s, because the Frierdiker Rebbe became the Rebbe in 1920. We just, this past Shabbos was the Frierdiker Rebbe's father's birthday, and he passed away in 1920. So in 1920, the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rebbe number 6, took on the leadership of Chabad, and his father, this Ephraim Millen's father, went to the Frierdiker Rebbe to consult with him for advice on whether his family should move to Israel or not. So he said, if my father went to the Lubavitcher Rebbe for advice, I should do the same thing. So it's 1950. 1950, the Frierdiker Rebbe had just passed away, and the Rebbe had not yet accepted leadership, but still people were turning to him as a Rebbe, even though he kept on saying, I'm not the Rebbe. So he called a good Chabad friend of his was Pini Altes, and he said, can you arrange a meeting? And sure enough, 2 days later, he had a meeting set up at 11 a.m., and he went to see the Rebbe. He had a 40-minute meeting with the Rebbe. He said that, he spoke to the Rebbe in 3 languages, in Russian, French, and Hebrew. He was very impressed with the Rebbe's French. And the Rebbe was only a few years prior in France. And the Rebbe told him, he said the Rebbe knew more about the car industry than he did. The Rebbe was an engineer. I don't think in the car industry, but the Rebbe told him that a car is made up of 30,000 parts. So the Rebbe said that doesn't mean that an automobile company it requires 30,000 industries, but it does mean they'll need about 3,000 industries in order to support an automobile company, which means that if you open up an automobile plant in Israel, what it's going to do for the economy of Israel is unbelievable. So it's a tremendous opportunity, and you should absolutely do this. He encouraged him very strongly to do it. He said basically it could be the foundation of Israel's industry. And the reality is that it became, for about, I think for maybe for its first 10 years, it produced 28% of Israel's entire gross domestic product. That's how powerful this company ended up being. But he was terrified in investing. He said, where am I going to get the money? How am I going to do it? So the Rebbe told him something very simple. The Rebbe told him that in your life, you've accomplished some tremendous things. Every single time you undertook something, Hashem made sure to put everything together so everything would work out very well. He said, you don't have to worry because Hashem is going to handle this as well. You step in, make the commitment to do it, to take it on. Once you take it on, that creates the vessel, and the blessings will flow. And in fact, so he took it on. He said, I walked out of the Rebbe's office and I felt like a major weight was taken off of my shoulders. Why was a major weight taken off of his shoulders? Because one simple thing happened. The Rebbe, it helped him get in touch with trust that it's going to work out. The Rebbe didn't give him money. The Rebbe didn't give him a guarantee. The Rebbe just told him, Hashem was always there to make sure your things work out. Hashem's going to be there for you now too. And even more so that you're doing something that's such a tremendous thing for the Jewish people. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. So this is a story. I share these stories because these anecdotes, I believe, are very powerful in us seeing in real life and in modern life how when a person approaches something with trust, we can easily say, well, how do you know? I want a guarantee first. All of those things are a lack of trust. All of those things are, I want to be secure before I go in. And Hashem always says your security is trust. Security is not that you have the money, that you have the resources, that you have the know-how. Security is that you trust. When a person has that, a person can do almost anything. So with that, we're going to continue on page 13, where we're up to. Peace of mind and serenity. We had just started this last week. That one of the 5 benefits, and the Rabbi Yehuda ibn Pekudah, the author, is describing this as one of the 5 Torah benefits of trusting in Hashem, is peace of mind and serenity. Because for a person to serve God, a person has to have peace of mind and serenity. So among the Torah benefits of bitachon is when a person trusts in God, his trust will bring him to turn his heart away from a preoccupation with worldly matters. And I want to underline the word preoccupation. We have to engage in worldly matters. We have to eat, we have to sleep, we have to do business, right? Whatever the things we have to do, we have most of our day is filled with worldly occupations. But the question is, am I preoccupied with that? When I'm going to sleep at night, what is on my mind? If those things are on my mind, I'm preoccupied with them. They consume me. If Shabbos comes and I can't spend Shabbos as a day for Hashem, my mind is consumed with all other matters, I'm preoccupied. So that's why I'm underlining the word preoccupation. So trust brings a person to turn his heart away from preoccupation with the worldly matters. It doesn't take a person away from worldly matters. It takes a person away from preoccupation with worldly matters and instead dedicate himself to matters of divine service. So if you look on the bottom of the page where it says dedicate himself to matters of divine service, a primary disturbance of man's divine service is material worry. How will he provide for his family? How will he attain his needs? A person who trusts that God will provide will not have to battle these concerns, and this peace of mind will allow him to dedicate himself to divine service. You know, it's the same comment that we make about worry. You know, so when a person worries, we know that the worry really doesn't solve anything. Now, it's easier said than done. Yeah, what's helping you to worry? But we instinctively worry. But that being said, it's important for us to remind ourselves of the fact that the actual worry does nothing. All it does is preoccupy us with an obsession of trying to figure something out. When the person of trust, the difference between the person of trust and the person of worry is one person says, I'm going to trust. And the other person says, I'm going to worry. Right? And the difference spiritually is that worry puts a person in a state of fear. A state of fear always compresses, or in English, and I don't mean this in a clinical way, depresses a person. And actually, when a person is depressed or compressed, it means it makes us smaller. It makes what is possible very small. Whereas when a person is in a state of bitachon, of trust, what happens is what is possible becomes much broader. And that's a choice we make. Whether we want to live in, what I like to say is, we want to live in the realm of possibility, or we want to live in a belief of impossibility. That's the difference between trust and worry. So in terms of the tranquility of his soul, peace of mind and lack of worry regarding worldly matters can be compared to an alchemist. Okay, so here he runs on a theme here about an alchemist. An alchemist is, if you look on the bottom, it tells you that during the Middle Ages, when the Chovot Halevavot was written, the idea of alchemy was attractive because it promised immense wealth to anyone successful. So alchemy is basically people who had a belief, whether it was true or not true, but that they can take certain types of materials in the earth, usually certain metals, and convert them into gold, and then they can become strike gold literally and become wealthy. But it was a whole process and type of supposedly a secret of how exactly to do that. But if you know how to do that, you made a lot of money. And this is just think of this as a means of making a lot of money, which is something that most people dream about at some point or at many points in their life, right? Why do we dream about that? Because our belief is that if we can find a way to make a lot of money, then our lives will be fine. Because if you have a lot of money, your life is fine. We'll discuss many aspects of the untruth of that, but even the untruth that we have in our intellectual mind, I still find that still emotionally there's a part of us that believes that. And so that's really the point he's making. And we know the same way an alchemist, he's going to describe different aspects of the alchemist and the downsides of being an alchemist in comparison to someone who trusts in Hashem. So we can see that those things all cross over to someone who's trying to make money in whatever type of business venture, which consumes us and requires all different types of resources, comes with all different types of risks. And just a moment. Yeah. And all different types of risks. And when someone is trusting in Hashem, doesn't have any of those risks. And that's the point he's going to make. And he's going to actually make 10 comparisons between an alchemist and a person who trusts in Hashem to bring all of these out. So again, you just need to use your creativity now, and I hope to help you through the process of it, to just see how an alchemist is basically a person trying to make a lot of money using a particular means, which is essentially what we all do. And that's a fine thing to do. We need to make money to support ourselves and our family. However, when it's done at the expense of our well-being, because we are depending on ourselves, then we pay the price for that. Whereas when we're doing it just as a means for Hashem to send his blessing, we're doing it with trust in Hashem. As I had a little Farbrengen, we call it on Shabbos, and somehow this statement came out where I said that if you take credit for your successes, then you will also take credit for your failures, which is not a good thing. But if you don't take credit for your successes, you also don't take credit for your failures, meaning that when a person trusts that his blessings are from Hashem, so when he made an effort for a blessing, and Hashem blessed it, what does he say? Thank you, Hashem. Thank you for giving me the insight and the ability to make the channel, and thank you for blessing the channel with your blessings. And when a person does everything they can to produce something successful and it fails, are they at fault? No. They did everything they should have, that was meant to be done. They did the best they can do it. And Hashem didn't want to bless that. So I'm not disappointed and not upset at myself. I don't identify with it. I don't say I'm a failure. What's going to be with me? I'm a loser, etc., etc. Right? None of those things happen. But when a person takes credit for their successes, they basically believe everything is them. When they fail, they're also deeply disappointed, and they blame themselves. So it's a double-edged sword. And likewise, when everything we do, we can see it. We can do it through trust, or we can do it through, we'll say, ego, through me, the power of me. So this is where he goes to with this. So with the alchemist, on the top of page 14, which is a person who knows how to transform silver to gold and copper and iron to silver through his talents and efforts. Such a person, if it were possible, would have little worry regarding his livelihood. If this was a possible thing to do, you can really solve your livelihood problem. If I took all the silver in my home and turned it into gold, I think I'd be doing pretty nicely right now. A person who has bitachon can be compared to someone whose livelihood is secure because he knows how to transform cheap materials into gold and silver. And therefore has little to worry about. In fact, the author will now establish that a person who has bitachon is superior to an alchemist. Okay, so here he goes with the comparison. So the first thing he's going to mention is that an alchemist always needs materials in order to be able to do their alchemy, right? They need some material in order to be able to produce what they're going to produce. It reminds me of that well-known joke about the scientists who in 2023 they come to God because they're so advanced, and they said, God, we figured out how to make a human too. We can do cloning. We know the whole science of it already. So you can retire, God. We don't need you anymore. So God says, really? Wow, you're so advanced. I'm so impressed. Why don't you go ahead and make a human being? So what did they do? They did what God did. What did God do when he made Adam? He took earth, he shaped it in the shape of man, he breathed into it a breath of life, blew into it a neshama, and suddenly this earth came to life as a human being, like me and you. So they went to grab some earth. So Hashem says, wait, one second. Don't take my materials. You're going to make a man like I did? Make it like I did. Make your own earth and start from scratch. No cheating. So the alchemist needs materials in order to work with. So moreover, a person who is strong in his trust of God is superior to the alchemist in 10 ways. First of all, the alchemist needs specific materials for all his work and cannot complete it without them. These tools are not accessible at all times and in all places. So you want to open up a business, you're going to need a space, you need computers, you need phones, you need whatever, depending on what the business is, you need goods, etc., etc. Conversely, a person who trusts in God has his sustenance guaranteed from any means available in the world. You don't need anything in particular. You only need what Hashem is going to send you. As the verse says regarding the manna that the Jews ate in the desert, so that he, God, would make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but by whatever comes from the mouth of the Lord does man live. And part of the lesson of the manna is to teach us that our sustenance comes from God. It doesn't come from anything else. So manna can even fall from heaven, and that's how you can be sustained. Hard for us to imagine. We never experienced that in our life. But that's the reason why the founding of the Jewish people, the first 40 years of the Jewish people was eating directly from God. Because it was establishing us in a certain position. As in the desert, page 15, in the desert, the Jews were not sustained by God in the usual way, through the consumption of regular food. Instead, he sustained them by providing the manna, which fell freely from heaven. This illustrates that God is not limited to the natural order. Rather, he can provide for us in any manner he wishes. So Hashem can provide for us in any manner that he wants. As the author continues, for means of providing sustenance are not lacking from God at any time or in any place. As you know from the story of Elijah with the ravens and with the widow, and from how God sustained him with the cold-baked cake and flask of water. So what's he referring to? He's referring to, you can look on the bottom of the page, that Elijah the prophet, Eliyahu Hanavi, he went there. We have some really fascinating history and quite shocking. But I think very important to know and read, and you can read it by buying a set of books called The Family Midrash Says. If you want to buy that series of books, I read it to my kids before they go to sleep. The Family Midrash Says. It starts with the book of Joshua. It goes through the prophets, which it's picking up after the 5 books of Moses. Part of our Tanakh, part of the written law is the 5 books of Moses, which we call the Torah in a very general sense. And then you have the Nevi'im and the Ksuvim, the prophets and the writings. The prophets, at least the first part of the prophets, is not really so much prophecy, but the story of the Jewish people as they came into the land of Israel. For the first few hundred years, fascinating history. And there's a lot you learn in faith from these stories. So you'll learn about Elijah, you'll learn about the fact that the Jewish people split, where there was a split between the 10 tribes and the 2 tribes. And the 10 tribes did something really shocking. I'm just going to give you the brief synopsis. The leader of the one who split off of made the split, he split off of the tribe of Yehuda and Binyamin, who had Jerusalem, and the Holy Temple. And in order to secure themselves as independent, the 10 tribes, they put up roadblocks preventing Jews from going to the Holy Temple. Can you imagine that? The Holy Temple was young. It was not very old. And already, most of the Jewish people were being prevented from going to the temple. And he created other replacement temples with images, like completely against everything that Judaism stands for, with all of these justifications. Anyway, they ended up being 2 kings amongst the Jewish people, the king of the 2 tribes and the king of the 10 tribes. It's called Yehuda and Yisrael, Judah and Israel. Those were the 2 groups of the Jewish people. The 2 tribes were Yehuda, called Yehuda, and the 10 tribes were called Yisrael. And Yisrael started developing kings who were actually very wicked kings, some of them. One of them was King, you heard of Ahab. Everyone heard of Ahab, right? From, what's the name of the book? Whatever it is. Yeah.
Moby Dick.
Moby Dick. There you go. Okay. Right. So Ahab, the original Ahab, was a Jewish king whose name was Achav in Hebrew. And he was married to a woman by the name of Jezebel. Jezebel, I think it's pronounced in English, right?
Jezebel.
Right? What's that? Yeah.
What you said, Jezebel.
Jezebel, thank you. You're right, Jezebel. And she was an extremely wicked woman. On top of the fact that they both served idolatry, Jezebel also she was extremely wicked. We'll see in a minute. And so Elijah the prophet was told by God to go to them and tell them that if they don't straighten themselves up, there's going to be a famine and no rain's going to fall. And so Elijah the prophet, Eliyahu Navi, is the one who had this mission to go in front of 2 wicked people who do not hesitate to kill someone and give them this news is putting your life at risk. But of course, he was the agent of God. So he went and told them, and then God told him to run away and hide. And when he hid, God had ravens bring food to him every day. Can you imagine that? Ravens were delivering food to the Navi, right? It's completely miraculous. Because if Hashem wants to sustain someone, Hashem sustains someone. And then Hashem told him that at some point that he should go to a certain city where there was a widow, and she'll continue to take care of him. And the second he walked into the city, he met this widow, and she gave Eliyahu water to drink and took care of him. What ended up happening was Jezebel was so wicked that she ordered the murder of all prophets amongst the Jewish people. Now, in those days, they had yeshivas for prophecy. It was a certain way of life. Not every prophet became a historic prophet like Elijah the prophet, who prophesies to the Jewish people. But the idea of prophecy is a person who develops a state where they remain focused on God and not on worldly affairs, and in being in an alignment with Hashem, and in a state of happiness and complete trust, etc., a person can get themselves in that very elevated state. Then Hashem communicates with them, not necessarily in a communication that is for them to convey to the Jewish people, like leading prophets had, but even it was a sense of an awareness of Hashem and a sense of some type of a messaging from Hashem, which is very powerful. So there were thousands and thousands, the Talmud says, hundreds of thousands even of students of the prophets who were minor prophets, and she ordered all prophets to be killed. So there was a man by the name of Avadia who hid 100 prophets in caves, and he took it upon himself to feed them. And he worked in the palace. Actually, he ran the kitchen. The royal kitchen was run by Avadia, And for whatever reason, which we're not sure, King Achav, the king Ahab, did not bother Ovadia. And we're not sure whether he did know or didn't know what he was doing, which was defying the queen's orders, but he continued to do it. And he had to feed 100 people every single day, which was, at some point he ran out of money. He took a loan. A lot of stories about this. But the bottom line is he took great risk in order to feed them. And that's what we have in the next point that he makes. These stories illustrate that God is not limited by nature and will always provide those who rely on him with their needs. It's similar to the fact that, it's similar to a person who would wake up and say, God, I want to open up a business. I'd like to make money. I'd like to support my family. I'd like to give tzedakah. Give me Hashem, Hashem, give me access to someone, to something, to some goods. I have no idea what I don't know exactly how I'm going to make what my business is going to be. Hashem, show me what my business is going to be. And one day, he walks into, he bumps into someone. The person mentions that he does this, that, and suddenly things start forming, and suddenly the guy's got the business going. That's Hashem. That's how Hashem sets people up. So this concept can also be seen in the story of Avadia with the prophets, about which he said, I hid 100 men of the prophets of the Lord, 50 men in each cave, and I provided them with bread and water. And it says, young lions suffer want and are hungry, but those who seek the Lord do not lack any good. I believe we had this verse already quoted once. And as the preceding verse says, fear the Lord, his holy ones, that God's holy ones should fear him, for there is no lack for those who fear him. If someone lives in a state of awe of the awesomeness of God, which is what fear means, to live in awe of God, and he knows that all blessings come from Hashem, there's nothing to be concerned about. Hashem has you covered. And by the way, if you ask any person how they started their business, they will tell you the story I just said. That they met someone, this happened, that happened, and it all started coming together. And a person can either see it as me having done that. That's one way of seeing it. Another way of seeing it is realizing that Hashem set things up so I should be able to see it. Yeah. So in these last two verses, we see once again that those who rely on Hashem do not lack anything. As mentioned, this is because God has unlimited ability to provide those who rely on him. Now he goes to the second manner. So the first manner is, that the alchemist needs materials. Someone who trusts in Hashem doesn't need any materials. Hashem will provide them with whatever they need. Number two, the second manner in which a person who has bitachon is superior to an alchemist. The alchemist needs to perform certain actions and procedures in order to produce the silver and gold, and cannot reach this goal without them. He's got to smelt the metals and do whatever other mechanisms that a alchemist would need to do to convert one metal into another. Additionally, it is possible that the fumes and the smoke that he inhales will cause him to die as a result of his working continuously and spending long amounts of time toiling with them day and night. How many people can actually relate to this? That very often we're so obsessed and consumed, I should say, we're so consumed with making the money that the actual means that we use to make the money actually hurts our health, either because of the amount of hours we spend, the amount of travel, that we compromise our eating habits because of the our being consumed in the business, staying up late, and the only thing that can keep us going is is sugar to keep us energized, whatever it may be. So we very often sacrifice what is most important to a person, which is health, in order to make money. Conversely, a person who trusts in Hashem is secure from any mishaps in the present, and also feels secure that no bad will happen to him in the future. This is because he believes that anything that happens to him is from Hashem, and will therefore be a cause of joy and happiness. Okay, this is a deep statement. But basically what he's saying is that because he's living with the awareness of Hashem and the presence of Hashem, see, he feels secure, number one, that no bad will happen to him in the future. Let me explain this, because this really is an underlying, this little line is an underlying theme through the entire book of Shaar Habitachon, which we also need to keep in mind. And that is that trust in Hashem means that as I'm looking forward into the future, I trust that everything is going to be excellent, because I know that Hashem loves me. Hashem only does good, and the ultimate good is good as I experience it as a human being in this world, and therefore I trust Hashem will do only good. And therefore, if someone asks me about the future, how things are going to be, I know that they're going to be good. I know that. That's my state of being. I know they're going to be good. For things that already happened to me that may not have been good, because they already happened, it's not forward, it's now hindsight. I know also that those things happen, as he says, and will therefore be a cause of joy and happiness. That everything Hashem does ultimately is good, and even though it was a negative experience for me, because I have such trust in Hashem, I know that for some reason Hashem needed me to go through that experience. That's the way a person who trusts in Hashem looks at things. And therefore, so again, this is because he believes that anything that happens to him is from Hashem, and will therefore be a cause of joy and happiness. His sustenance will come to him in a restful, calm, and peaceful manner. And I know Hashem's going to give it to me without any stress. Which, by the way, most of our stress is not from Hashem, it's from us. Right? It's a choice. Most of our stress is a choice. Now, if you look on the bottom of the page where it says secure from any mishaps in the present, and also feel secure that no bad will happen to him in the future, there are people who, although content about their present situation, are worried about the future. They're constantly worried about their fortune, that their fortune may change, God forbid. Always right, yes, I have some savings, but is it going to be enough? Who knows what can happen? And look at the economy. And what happens if I get sick? And what happens if this happens and that happens? So we feel very insecure. What does bitachon mean? Security. That's actually what bitachon means. It means security. So the person who places his trust in Hashem is not only certain about his current situation, but he's also certain and assured about his future. He puts all of his concerns in Hashem's hands. I don't worry about them. And here's another very important commentary on the bottom. It will be a cause of joy and happiness. The Pas Lechem explains that it is natural and easily observable that bad befalls even people who have bitachon. Okay, now this is a major question, so it is a very important point to be addressed. We know that people who have bitachon also have difficulties in life. So you're telling me I should trust in Hashem? That's why my life is going to be better by trusting in Hashem? Look, this guy trusts in Hashem. His life isn't perfect at all. So nonetheless, because this person trusts that everything God does is for the good, he is able to accept whatever comes his way joyfully. That literally, he knows that everything that happens to him is from Hashem. It's not random suffering. Hashem wants me to experience this now for some reason. I daven to Hashem that I shouldn't need this. I even trust in Hashem that I won't have this. But when it shows up, for whatever reason, Hashem decides, despite everything, that I need to go through this experience, I know it's from Hashem. Furthermore, and perhaps a more advanced level of trust, the person who trusts in God is constantly happy because he knows that a challenging situation really seems like a difficult situation, but inherently it is good. Because a person who trusts in Hashem trusts that everything that is from Hashem is for the good. There's a well-known story in the Talmud, which I'll paraphrase. There was a man by the name of Nachum He was known as Nachum Ish Gamzu. Nachum, the man of Gamzu. What is Gamzu? He used to always say a phrase, Gamzu litova. This also is for the good. Anything that would happen to him, he would say, this is also for the good. Something bad happened, this is also for the good. And he had a wild story that happened to him once. And the wild story that happened to him once was he was designated by the Jewish people, because he was a great man, to go bring a gift to the emperor of Rome. On behalf of the Jewish people, what gift are they going to give him? So they filled a chest with diamonds, rubies, and very valuable stones to bring to the to the emperor of Rome. On his way, he stayed in the hotel, and the people in the hotel got wind of the fact that this guy has something valuable. They saw the chest, and they basically at some point broke into his room. They stole all of the valuable stones and gems, and they refilled the chest with dirt. So it had weight. He had no idea. And he took this chest and he goes to the emperor. And he says, Emperor, a gift from the Jewish people. Can you imagine such a thing happening? They open up we're talking about an emperor, he's a dictator. He's not living in a democracy. And they open up the chest and they see dirt. The emperor thought the man's making a mockery, the Jews are making a mockery of him. So one of his advisors, who happened to have been Elijah the prophet, dressed in the form of an advisor, said, Emperor, I don't think this is ordinary dirt. If you remember, the Jews have an ancestor by the name of Abraham, Avraham Avinu. We read about in the Torah these weeks. And there's a well-known story with Avraham where he fought against the kings. We just read about it. And what he used a special dirt that when you threw the dirt, miraculously it turned into arrows. And you have hundreds of arrows flying from throwing a handful of dirt. So he said, maybe this is the same dirt as their forefather, and that's what they're giving you. So he sent some men out to try it out. And in fact, that's what happened. A miracle happened, and it turned into flying spears. And that's because Nachum always said, Gam Zulatova, this is also for the good. It looks crazy. It's for the everything Hashem does is for the good. That is a person who truly believes in Hashem. By the way, even when we don't see it turning into arrows, it's for the good. There are many reasons why Hashem will do something which are very often beyond our understanding. So I see someone wrote that a person can still worry that the good plan that God has for him involves hardship and pain. Yes, and how do we achieve this trust and acceptance of unpleasant situations? So there's two things. Trust is that we will not have unpleasant situations. That's trust. Once we have an unpleasant situation, trust is trust is in the future. But now we're in the present. The present is I have an unfortunate situation. So I remind myself that for whatever reason Hashem decided to give it to me anyway. And for some reason, and it's for a good reason. And I accept that I live with Hashem. So I accept that everything that happens to me is from Hashem. That's really the key here. I'm living with God. I live with the presence of Hashem. So for the future, I trust that it will all be good. And that is, by the way, the greatest merit to create only goodness for the future. But it's not a guarantee that Hashem says just because you trust. Hashem has a million things there are a million things that go into the equation of what Hashem decides to give us. But not worrying is trusting. That is how you don't worry. You trust. I trust that I have a loving father, and the loving father always gives his child only good. And sometimes it's possible. Yes, it is possible. But I don't trust that's going to happen. That's a trusting person. If it does happen, it happened. So now I trust that Hashem did this for me for a good reason, because Hashem wanted me to go through this experience. And we all know, every one of us here is mature enough to know that there are many things in our life that we would not develop had we not gone through a challenge. And even though in concept we understand the value of it, we would never have stepped up to it unless we were forced into it. And often that is the blessing that Hashem's giving us. Very often that's the blessing. There's a saying in Hebrew, Ein chacham ki bal hanisayon. There is no one as wise as a person with experience. That's essentially what it means. The reality is that without certain experiences, we can't really get the value of certain things in life. And so sometimes Hashem says, I'm going to make you a man of experience, so to speak. I'm going to give you experience. Now, we trust Hashem is going to make sure we have everything we need and we understand everything we need to know without that. Because Hashem can do that. But sometimes Hashem, for whatever reason, wants us to have go through that experience. I hope that answers somewhat the question. I think the question is more emotional than it is intellectual, and there's no right. So our emotions are emotions. Yeah, and none of us are better. None of us are saved from those emotions. But however, when our trust increases, those emotions definitely decrease. When we know that this is happening for a good reason, even though I don't see that good reason now, that changes the way we experience something without a question. You can see that a story that stands out for me is there was a story you may remember. I don't know how many years ago it was, maybe 10 or so years ago, where there's a big tragedy in Brooklyn where there's a fire in a home and a man lost a good number of his children in the fire. It was a devastating story. Is one daughter and his wife were badly injured, and a number of children, maybe 6 or 7 children were killed in the fire. So he lost this all in one day. This all happened in one day. And by the funeral, I think it was, when he spoke, he said things which were unimaginable for a person to say. It's just unimaginable. It's just beyond me. That's with teaching all of Shaar Habitachon, it's amazing to me that a person would be able to have some. He was able to carry that. His pain is probably until today beyond what anyone can imagine. That's the emotion. But at the same time, he's able to carry the pain because he has the context of bitachon, of trust in Hashem. Someone who doesn't have bitachon can't manage the pain. The pain overwhelms them. So that's often the big difference between one and the other. It's being able to have the shoulders to carry it versus not having the shoulders to carry it. And the difference between the two is enormous. It's whether you can move on with your life or not. Okay, so let's continue on page 17. Since his work is not limited to a job that involves particular actions and procedures, a person who has trust in Hashem is not fixed on doing a particular things that can harm him or hurt his health. His livelihood is more secure than that of the alchemist, because his livelihood can come from anything. Someone who trusts in Hashem, however Hashem sends it. Additionally, he doesn't have to worry about the dangers inherent in the job, as the alchemist does. As it says, King David writes in Tehillim, you may be familiar with this, the famous chapter 23. He causes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. That God takes me on a very tranquil path. The third manner in which a person who has a bitachon is superior to the alchemist is secretive towards others out of concern of himself. There's a very big pain or inhibition when a person cannot share their share of what's going on with themselves. When a person has to live a life of secrecy, when a person has to hide, it's a very strong way of a person being minimized. And an alchemist, it has to be secretive, out of concern for himself. Why is he concerned? He's concerned because what he's doing really is illegal, And therefore, he's concerned that the government's going to find out. So when you do something and you're concerned the government's going to find out, you don't want anyone to know, because who knows who's going to leak this. Due to this fear, he's unable to confide in others and receive the necessary advice in order to be successful. And by the way, there are many people, this is problematic, of course, for a number of reasons. But there are many people who believe that the only way they can do well is if they cheat. If they do things which are illegal or immoral or unethical, any of those things, which is, by the way, completely forbidden for a Jew to do. And it's also a big lack of faith. That's clear. Like, why do you have to do that? If God is the one who provides you with a livelihood, God will provide you with a livelihood. You think you need to outsmart a system and do things under the table in order to make money? You think you need to steal from someone else to make money? So conversely, page 18, conversely, a person who trusts in God is not afraid of telling anyone about his trust. On the contrary, he boasts about it. Boasts meaning he's proud of it, not in an arrogant way, but proud of it in the way of he shares it with people. As King David of blessed memory said, I trusted in God, I will not fear. What can man do to me? Because man can do nothing to me if God doesn't want man to be able to do anything to me. Familiar with that? That's a big fundamental in our trust in Hashem. That if we trust in Hashem, we also know that no one can do anything to me unless Hashem wants it. Otherwise, a person can try as hard as they want and they can't touch me. That's all part of trusting in Hashem. It's also knowing that when someone does do something negative to me, that Hashem wanted me to experience that. And that's why I'm experiencing it. Which is the reason why, while the perpetrator is not someone that we get upset with for having caused us to have gone through this, because they weren't the ones who caused us to have gone through it. Hashem wanted us to experience this, and that's why we experienced it. Had it not been this person, it would have been through someone else. That doesn't mean that we don't seek justice for this person, because we have an obligation not to let injustices happen in the world. But I'm not angry at this person because with the belief that this person caused me to go through this, and without them, I would not have gone through it. Okay, the fourth manner in which a person who has bitachon is superior to the alchemist. The alchemist must either prepare an abundance of gold and silver for a time when he will need it, or prepare just the right amount for the interim. An alchemist, like us, either he wants to make sure at least that he has enough money now for the next month to pay this month's mortgage, or he may even want to make sure he has an abundance, he has savings, so he's secure for the next year, for the next 5 years or 10 years. Either way, the alchemist is constantly in a state of anxiety. Now, how does a person of trust live? A person who trusts in God really doesn't need any plans. Hashem takes care of me. If he prepares a lot, so if he prepares a lot, the alchemist, he will constantly be afraid that he will somehow lose the silver or gold that he has already produced. He will not be able to feel calm or relaxed due to the fear of the king, who might take it away from him, and due to fear of the people who might steal it from him. Which is really interesting, because very often you find that the more money a person makes is by certain people. It's not true across the board. But certain people, the more money they make, the more difficult it is for them to be generous, because they're more worried about losing it, however that may happen. If, on the other hand, he only prepares enough gold and silver to last for a short amount of time, then what happens? A situation might arise where he will not be able to produce more due to lack of necessary materials at a time when he will be in great need for them. If he doesn't have a lot of savings, then he worries, what happens if I suddenly need and I can't get access to my resources to make more gold? I'm going to have a problem. In both of the above scenarios, the alchemist is worried that he might be left penniless. Either he's afraid that whatever silver or gold he has amassed will be seized or stolen from him, or he's afraid that he will be potentially left with nothing as a result of the inability to produce more.
Rabbi,
Now the author contrasts this with a person who relies on God.
is it okay to ask a question?
Yeah, what's that? Yeah,
I
sure.
said, is it okay to ask a question?
Absolutely.
So, and I understand everything, but I'm getting on, I guess, looking at it from a business perspective, right? How do
Yeah.
I apply this to budgeting, to capital savings, to a business perspective where you trust, but you have to also plan, for annually, sometimes a little. So how, like, I guess it's hard for me to apply this to business.
Yeah. So in regards to planning, like I would say the same thing for savings, right? So there is a natural structure for the way things work in this world. And in our modern world, things work in a certain structure, right? And one of the ways that a businessman makes money is with savings, investments, all of these different things. It's all just part of the business.
Right.
Right? There's nothing wrong with doing that. The question is, am I putting my security in the savings? Or am I creating savings because that's the way Hashem says the world works today, that you create savings and that's how you'll have money for your future. So I'm following the structure of the way any a financial advisor would guide me to do, right? And that's what I'm doing. And I know, and I trust that Hashem's going to send me the blessings through this.
Okay.
Right. Again, the key is not so much what we do, but where our security is. Right. And we can delude ourselves very easily in saying, yeah, I trust in Hashem. But we have to get into a real place of consciousness of Hashem. And the way we know that is when it gets challenged. The market tanks a little bit. Do we get worried? Say, okay, the market tanked. Right? Hashem's shaking things up. He's doing his things. Right? So when we get gripped with fear, we know that our faith really is our trust is in something else. And those are like the testing moments where we can assess ourselves, and not in a way that should be critical, but in a way of awareness. So I have to work in more trust in Hashem, in truly trusting that my blessings are coming from Hashem.
Thank you.
And that things can slip, and that's fine. So someone else asked a question. I'm not sure. So, Bonnie, I'm not sure what this refers to, but this relates to interpersonal relationships. How does it apply in the world? What's happening in Eretz Yisrael? I'm just going to give a synopsis, a very brief comment, and hopefully it's going to answer your question. I'm assuming you're just asking this whole idea of trusting. How does this work with what's happening in Eretz Yisrael? So again, when something negative happens to us, we trust that Hashem has a bigger picture in what is going on, which we don't understand, and it could be extremely painful for us as humans as we experience it. And that's the story of Eretz Yisrael. An unbelievably devastating thing happened, which has pained the Jews around the world tremendously, and has been, I would describe it as overwhelming, really overwhelming and indigestible. And when we trust in Hashem, we trust that this is all from Hashem. We don't take Hashem out of the picture. Hashem is always in the picture. We have no explanation for it whatsoever. There's no way that we can explain it. We trust that it is for the good. We don't, right? Not that it is good, but it's for the good. And that today Hashem will give us only revealed good. And that approach itself is what secures more good today than otherwise, by our being aligned with Hashem in this very deep way. And And it's conflicting because emotionally it's overwhelming. And our mind can't grasp it, which is the way we relate to most things. So what do we have to do? We have to go to our depth, which is our neshama, and we have to trust, which trusting is not really a logical thing. It's a neshama thing. It's a soulful thing, where I trust I am living in the reality of God. Everything that happens is from Hashem. Sometimes Hashem does things which I will never understand. I still accept the from Hashem, and I trust that Hashem is going to give us only revealed good. When we live in that state, that is what brings the greatest merit for absolute revealed good. That means good even in the experience of a human being in this world. And that's what the whole book of Gate of Trust is really about. I think as we go through it more and more, hopefully we'll be able to absorb it more and more and carry it wherever we go. Like I was speaking with a relative of mine yesterday, and some of these ideas came up, and they were saying how do you explain a child that has cancer? So she said that I always explain it as it's DNA. That's the easiest way. It's an easy way for me to explain it. When I mix God in, how can God do something like that? So it's DNA. So I explained to her that you're avoiding the real conflict. You're conflicted because you believe in Hashem, but you can't imagine a God who would do something so horrific. So what do? You take God out of the picture and you say it's DNA. Right? You're avoiding your conflict. Right? There's a God who runs the world, and something horrible is happening. So instead of taking God out of the picture and running to a scientific explanation of DNA, let's be clear that science is God in operating in nature. DNA doesn't take God out of the picture. DNA is God. God's doing this, which is really shocking, which our minds cannot grasp, will never grasp, and should never grasp. And we trust that for whatever reason Hashem is doing it, which we'll probably never know, and we trust that Hashem's going to fix it too, and Hashem's only going to give us good. But taking God out of the picture is just avoiding the reality of what's going on, and that this is deep faith, that we're in pain, we're in an emotional state of pain, we cry out to Hashem, we protest to Hashem, we even protest to what happened, and we're still with Hashem. I'll review the beginning of, because we're over time here, I'll review next week. We'll begin with, some of you may have seen an unbelievably powerful video of a member of Knesset, a woman who spoke about the mother of Ori Migadish, the hostage who the IDF was able to release. Anyone see that video? Okay, so I'm going to share with you. I'll paraphrase what was shared, because it's extremely powerful and touches exactly upon this, and experiencing a woman live expressing this, who's in the throes of the deepest pain, that one of the deepest forms of pain a person can be in, and she was still in the presence of Hashem 100%. So you have something to look forward to for next week. Okay, everyone, have a wonderful day, a wonderful week. Looking forward to next week's class.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
You, Rabbi.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
And by the way, I want to just mention, for those of you who are still on, that a week from Tuesday, there's going to be a fantastic women's program, which is a woman gathering in unity and song on Tuesday evening, next a week from tomorrow night, which you should receive an email. If you didn't reserve yet, please reserve for that event. I think it's going to be a very special event for women.
It's at 7 o'clock, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Me too.
Thank you. You too.
You're welcome.